So we have this question here. It says the return on two companies A and B are shown in the associated are shown below with the associated probabilities. I mean, given the state of the economy, the probabilities for each of the states, the returns for each state on company A. The economy is in a boom, probability is 0.15 or 15%. Okay, the return you get on company A is 20%, and the return you get on company B is 3%. The economy is growing. Probability is 0.25, which is 25%. If you invest in company A, your return will be 10%. If you invest in company B, your return will be 35%. Okay, so that's how you read this, right? So the first question here is calculate the expected rate of return for both company A and okay. So this is the formula for expected return. Expected return is the summation of the probability of the state of the economy multiplied by return in that state of economy. Okay. That is the expected return, which is written like this: summation of PI times RI. Just saying PI is just the individual probability, RI is the individual return. So we're going to apply this formula here. So we start with company A. Okay. So basically, we're multiplying the probability by the return. Okay. Probability by return. Probability by return. Probability by return. Okay. So when you do this, so 0.15 multiplied by 20%, 3%. 0.25 multiplied by 10%, you get 2.5. 0.2 multiplied by 15%, you get 3. 0.3 multiplied by 5%, you get 1.5. Okay? That's what we're doing here. Multiplying the probability with the individual return. Then after you do that, madam, you add up. You add up 3 plus 2.5 plus 3 plus 1.5. The expected return 10%. So this is the average return that you're going to get if you invest in company A. Okay, expected return is just your average return. Okay, so if you invest in company A, your expected return is going to be 10%. Any questions? Company B, the probability multiplied by the return. Probability again multiplied by return. 0.25 times 35%. 0.2 multiplied by 25%. 0.3 multiplied by negative 5%. Then you total up. 12.7%. So the average return that you're going to get if you invest in company thing B is 12.7%. Yes. Any questions? Okay. ER is just the expected return. All right. Next, we're going to part B, which is saying that calculate the risk, the standard deviation for both A and B. Okay. So the risk that your return is going to be different from your average return. That's what we're measuring here. Okay. The risk that your return is going to be different from the average. Okay. So let me get this here. So we'll start with company A. Okay. Here we're going to put expected returns, ERE, expected return. Expected return is 10%. So you're going to put here 10, 10, 10, 10. Let me get the formula for the standard deviation so that you see what's happening here. So the formula for the standard deviation is this one. The square root of the summation of the probability multiplied by the return minus the expected return squared. Okay. Yes. So I'm going to apply this formula. Huh? No. Okay, and then so here, as the formula is saying, we're going to start with this part here, where we're going to subtract the return minus the expected return. Okay, this is called the deviation. Okay, so 20% minus 10%, 10. 10% minus 10%, 0. 15% minus 10%, 5%. 5% minus 10%, negative 5%. Okay, we have just subtracted the return minus the expected return. And after we subtract that, this is the after we get the deviation basic, because return minus expected return is deviation. After you get the deviation, you square each deviation. So you're going to say 10 squared here, 100. 0 squared here, 0. 5 squared, 25. Negative 5 squared, 25. Okay. We've squared each over the deviations. So we have done this part of the formula now. Here, this return minus expected return squared. Then the next thing is now we're going to multiply this by the probability. Okay. Probability probability multiplied by the thing. So the probability, so we're going to say 0.15 multiplied by 100, 15. 0.25 multiplied by 0, 0. 0.2 multiplied by 25, 5. 0.3 multiplied by 25, 5. Now we have done this part of the formula. Multiply the probability by the return minus the expected return squared. So next we need to add up this sigma here, this symbol which looks like an E, means you have to add them up. Okay. So we're going to have to add 15 plus 0 plus 5 plus 7.5. You get 27.5. Okay, so what we have calculated here is what you call the variance. The variance is just the standard deviation squared. Okay. Now the question said we have to get the standard deviation. Okay. So the standard deviation, okay, square root, get the square root of 27.5, which gives us 5.244%. Okay. 5.24%. Yes. Any questions? Okay. So we go to company B. So company B, the expected return was let's see, 12.7%. Okay. Then the individual returns are these ones here. Yes. So we now do the same thing. You get the deviation return minus some expected return. Okay, each return you subtract it from, because the deviation is just saying how far each return is from the average. Okay, how far each return is from the average. After you get the deviations, you square them. You square each deviation. Okay. Then after squaring each deviation, you multiply it with the probability. 0.15 times 94.09, 0.25 multiplied by 497.29. Okay. You multiply by the probabilities. Okay. Then finally you add up. Okay. You get a variance of 262.68. And the standard deviation, square root of 262.8. Get the standard deviation of 16.2%. So what this means here now, from what we've tabulated here, it means company B has a higher standard deviation, meaning if you invest in company B, there's a high chance that the returns that you're going to get are going to be different from the average. Okay? They're going to be different from 12.7. Okay. Mhm. Company A, the standard deviation is low, so it means the returns that you get they'll be nearer to the average. But for company B, with a high standard deviation, the returns that you get they're not going to be very close to the average. Okay, they might be way higher or way lower. So what this entails is this: if you're someone who's a risk taker, you can invest in company B because there's a high chance that your returns can be way over 12.7%. Okay, but the downside is that if you make a loss, your loss also be a big loss. But if you're a conservative person, you can invest in company A because the standard deviation is low. The returns are not that far. Okay, you can visualize it like this here. Think of this as the number line here. Company A, the expected return is 10%. We've said we've got a standard deviation of 5.24. So you can just say, okay, 5.24 plus 10, you get 15.24. 5.24 minus 10, you get 5.24 minus 10, you get negative. You get 4.74%. I was supposed to say 10 minus 5.24, yes. So you can think of it like your returns are going to be in this range here. Yeah? Theoretically, your returns are going to be in this range. You might get a 10% return, you might get a 13% return, you might get a 5% return, you might get an 8% return. Okay. Your returns are like in that car in this range here. Okay. So with a smaller standard deviation, it means your returns are going to be nearer to the average. As you can see, 4 and 15 are near to 10%. Okay. Now for company B, average return is 12%. Standard deviation is 16%. So you can just say, okay, to the right hand side, 16 plus 12%, that's like 28%. 12% minus 16%, you get negative 4%. So this is the range of your returns for company B. You might make a 25% return. You might make a loss of 1%, a return of negative 1%, which is a loss. You might make a return of 10%, might make a return of 20%. The range is wide. Okay, the range is wide. Yes. Any questions before we go to the next part? We're calculating the coefficient of variation. This is what this is what coefficient of variation is. It's how much risk you're incurring for each unit of return. Okay, the risk per unit of return. Okay, how much risk you're incurring for the return that you're getting. Okay, so for example, it's a coefficient of variation. Just mute your mic first because I'm getting feedback. A risk, a coefficient of variation of 0.7 means you're incurring a 0.7% risk for every 1% of return. Okay. A coefficient of variation of zero point 0.8 is you're incurring a 0.8% risk for every 1% of return. Okay, so here the return is greater than the risk. Okay, the return is greater than the risk. So this is for a conservative person. You want to incur less risk for each unit of return. But for a risk taker who wants to make profit, okay, for example, maybe you have coefficient variation of 3. It means you're incurring 3% risk for every 1% return. Okay. So here the risk is higher than the return. Okay. Uh-huh. So that's what coefficient of variation is just here. The risk per unit of return. And how you get your coefficient of variation? It's your standard deviation divided by your expected return. Okay. So for company A, our expected return, so come here, coefficient of variation CV here. Yes. So coefficient of variation, we said standard deviation divided by expected return. So here the standard deviation for company A is 5.24 divided by the expected return of 10. You get 0.524. It is saying we're incurring a 0.52% risk for every 1% return. Okay. Company B, coefficient of variation, standard deviation 16.2 divided by expected return 12%. So for company B, you're incurring a 1.27% risk for every 1% return. Okay. So just remember this. If your coefficient of variation is greater than 1, it means the risk is higher than the return. Your coefficient of variation is less than 1, the risk is lower than the return. Okay. So if we compare the coefficient of variations of everything, company A coefficient of variation 0.524, low low coefficient of variation. Okay, and as you've seen, the expected return is 10%. Company B has got a higher return, but also at the same time, it's got also a higher standard deviation compared to company A. So even the coefficient variation is going to show this. Have you seen? The coefficient of variation 0.7. You can see the standard, the risk is greater than the expected return. Okay. So, yes. Any questions? Okay. So that's the first section of risk and return, where you're dealing with individual companies. Now we're going to combine it as a portfolio. Okay. Remember, a portfolio is where you group investments together. So you're saying, okay, I'm going to invest in company A and I'm going to invest in company B. Okay. So now we have to find the return of the portfolio. Just mute your mic because the feedback, we're getting feedback. So return on a portfolio. This is how you do it for return on a portfolio. They've told us in the question here, they've told us that if you invest 8 million in company A and invest 12 million in company B. Okay, so first things you have to find the weightages. Okay, basically you're just asking out of the total investment of 20 million, because 8 million in A, 12 million in B. So the total the total amount you're investing is 20 million. That's the total amount invested. So when you say the weightage of company A, it means out of the 20 million, what percentage is company A, the investment in company A represented as? Okay. So you say 8 divided by 20, 0.4. So company A represents 40% of that 20 million investment. For company B, out of this 20 million, what percentage is company B? 12 divided by 20 is 0.6. So 60% of this 20 million is the money that's invested in company B. Okay. Weightages. Because remember, the return on a portfolio, have you seen? The weightage multiplied by the expected return of the individual company. You see, the weightage of company A, let me put it like this, weightage of company A multiplied by expected return expected return of company A plus weightage of company B multiplied by expected return of company B. Okay, that's how you get the expected return for a portfolio. Okay, so remember company A, the expected return was 10%. The weightage here is 0.4. Company B, the weightage is 0.6 and the expected return was 12.7%. So 0.4 times 10, 4%. 0.6 times 12.7, 7.62%. So the expected return of the portfolio is 11.62%. That is the expected return of the portfolio. Any questions? Calculate the risk on the portfolio, basically the standard deviation of the portfolio. Okay. Now, when you're getting the standard deviation of a portfolio, there's one thing you need to tabulate, which is called the covariance. Okay. What the covariance is, this covariance is just showing the relationship between company A and B. Do they have a positive relationship? Meaning, if company A is doing well and you're making and profits are being made, also company B should also follow in the same way. That's a positive relationship. Okay. Negative relationship is where company A is doing well, company B is doing bad, and vice versa. Okay, so a covariance is just showing the relationship between two companies. Okay, the returns of two companies. If one company makes better returns and there's a positive relationship, the other company also better returns. Or if it's a negative relationship, one company will make better returns, the other one will make worse returns. So when you're making a portfolio, it's better you have a negative covariance. Why? So that if you make a loss in one company, at least you should make a profit in another company. Because with the positive covariance, if you make a loss in one company, then you're expected to make a loss in the other company. That's the bad side. On the good side, positive covariance, if you make a profit in one company, you make a profit in the other company. So you win double. Okay. But ideally, it's better you have a negative covariance so that you do not lay your eggs in one basket. Because remember, the purpose of a portfolio is you don't have to lay your eggs in one basket. Okay. Yes. So this is the formula for the covariance then. So let me bring it to Excel here. Guide this here's the you need to calculate the covariance because here's the formula for the risk of a portfolio. Have you seen here? The weightage of company A squared plus the variance of company A plus the weightage of company B squared divided by the variance of company B. And I was also saying the weightage of company B squared multiplied by the variance of company B. Okay. Then plus 2 times the weightage of company A multiplied by the weightage of company B multiplied by the covariance. Okay. The covariance is part of the in tabulating the portfolio standard deviation or portfolio risk. Mm. No, no, no. The standard deviation, we're getting the standard deviation at the end. The standard deviation will be applied. It's just that you always calculate the variance first before you get the standard deviation. So this is the formula for the covariance. Where is it? Okay, let me zoom in here. So for the covariance, okay, as you can see, the return of stock A minus the expected return of stock A. Oh, first you're going to get the probability multiplied by the return of stock A probability multiplied by the return of stock A minus the expected return of stock A multiplied by the return of stock B multiplied by the expected return of stock B. Okay, so let me put this in a table form. Okay, so you have the probability multiplied by the return of A. So stock A, the expected return was 10. So you put here 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 here. All right. Then here you're going to say return of A minus expected return of A. Okay. Return of A, expected return of A. Return of M. How? Then we have stock B here. Return of, okay, so let's start with stock A first, all right? The probabilities will stay here as they are. So basically, these are the deviations. Return of A minus the expected return. Okay, the deviations. Yes, right. Then we're going to do the same for stock B. Returns of stock B, then the expected return of stock B. Yeah. RB minus. Just hold on, madam. Okay, sorry about that. Return of B minus the expected return of B. So the expected return for B was 12.7. So 12.7 here. So return of B minus expected return. So I'm going to say 3 minus 12.7. 35 minus 12.7. 25 minus 12.7. And negative 5 times 12.7. Okay. This is what we've done so far here. Return minus expected return, return minus expected return. Okay. Then now we're now going to multiply with the probabilities now. Okay. So we're multiplying each of these deviations here. Here, these are the ones that we're going to multiply with the probability. This times that. Okay. So we're going to say 0.15 multiplied by 10 multiplied by negative 9.7. 0.25 multiplied by 0 multiplied by 22.3. 0.2 multiplied by 0.2 multiplied by, excuse me, 0.2 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 12.3. And here's 0.3 0.3 multiplied by negative 5. Okay, what's happening here? Let me remove these circles here. 0.3 multiplied by negative 5 multiplied by negative 17.7. Okay. So yes, we're just multiplying the probabilities here with the deviations of A, which is the return minus the expected return, multiplied by the deviations of B, return of B minus the expected return of B. So now we add. When you see this sigma symbol here, it means you just add up. So here we're going to add negative 14.5 plus 0 plus 12.3 plus 26.55. You get 24.3. So this is a positive covariance, meaning company A and B, they've got a positive relationship. Meaning, if you make a profit in company A, you're also expected to make a profit in B. Okay. If you make a loss in company A, you're also going to expect to make a loss in B. That's what a positive covariance is telling us. Okay. They're positively related, A and B. Excuse me. So now we need to calculate the, the standard deviation for the portfolio. So we start with the portfolio variance. As I said, the weightage of A multiplied by the variance of A plus the weightage of B multiplied by the variance of B plus 2 times the weightage of A times the weightage of B times the covariance. So remember, the weightage of A was 4.4, 0.4. So we square it, 0.4 squared. The variance of company A, if you remember when we were calculating the standard deviation, the variance of company A was this 12.7, 27.5 here. This was the variance for A. And for company B, the variance was 262. Okay. Weightage of B is 0.6 squared multiplied by 262.68 plus 2 times the weightage of A, 0.4, times the weightage of B, 0.6, times the covariance, 24.3. And then you multiply 0.6 times 7.5 plus 0.36 times 262.68 plus 0.48 times 24.3. You're going to get this value here, 110.62. Okay. Then we get the square root, because this is just the variance. The standard deviation is the square root of the variance. So the square root of 110.62 is 10.52%. That is the standard deviation of the portfolio. Any questions? So here's the interpretation of the results. Okay. Company A, B offers a higher expected return than company A. We saw company B, the expected return is 12.7%. A is 10%. However, company B is riskier than company A. Why? Because the standard deviation was 16% for company B. Company A, the standard deviation was 5%. Remember, standard deviation is just measuring the risk. The risk that your return is not going to be different from the average or expected return. Okay, and the coefficient of variation showed this because company A had a lower coefficient of variation, 0.52. 0.52% risk for every 1% return. Company B had a higher coefficient of variation. Okay, that's why it's more risky. Have you seen? It's more riskier, and that's represented with a higher coefficient of variation. A is less riskier, and it's represented by a lower coefficient of variation. Okay, so this coefficient of variation, apart from telling you what percent of risk in current form, every 1% return, it will give you an idea of which company is riskier. The one with a higher coefficient of variation, as I said, the coefficient of variation is greater than 1. The risk is greater than the return. So you'll be dealing with a riskier company. So if this person invests in both companies, A and B, okay, they get expected return of 11.62%, okay, which is higher than company A alone. But if you just invested in company B, the return was even higher, 12.7. Okay. But if you invest in both of these, your combined expected return is 11.62. All right. So as I said, company A is for risk averse investors, meaning people who are conservative. You don't want to take on risks. Okay, you just want to make your money. You don't want any risks. You want everything just to be smooth, not fluctuating. Okay, but company B is for risk tolerant investors, those who want to make profits, because in the investing world, if you want to make more profits, you have to incur a lot of risk. Okay. So someone who is risk tolerant is someone who's looking for higher profits. Okay. Yes. Any questions, madam?